Studio Higher, Module 4, Contrôle de lecture et d'écoute, Tests of Reading and Listening. Module 4 is a really key module for Theme 2. In it you've covered describing a place locally to you, saying what you can and cannot do there, so you've been using a variety of negatives, and really importantly you've used 3 tenses to say what you have done there, what you do regularly and what you will do in your locality. You're going to be doing a lot of repetition of this in the next module when you apply all of this language to how you spend holidays. In the next few lessons, probably the next 3 lessons, you'll be applying all of this learning to the typical test types that you'll meet at GCSE. This course, Studio, is a version which goes with AQA, which is the exam that we're doing. So it'll be really useful to do these tests which are at the end of each module. It's getting you used to the test type. Before you do these tests which come in the exercise book, I'm just going to introduce what the nature of the exam is for first of all for the reading and then for the listening at AQA. What you tested on and what's the exam going to look like for your GCSE French reading. Looking at the AQA specification, that's the exam board that we're using, there's a section which is just at a glance. So here is in summary what the reading is about. Not really rocket science. You're going to understand language and respond to it, importantly to different types of written language. You'll have a written exam. If you're doing the foundation, it'll be 45 minutes and the higher it'll be an hour. It contributes 60 marks. Each of the skills is either 60 or rounded up to 60, and then that becomes 25% of your GCSE. What are the questions going to be like? Well, at both foundation tier and higher tier you've got 3 sections. First section, questions in English, and you answer in English, or non-verbally, that means you tick a picture. B, questions in French to be answered in French or non-verbally. So that's probably that tends to be the most demanding one, where you've got to actually understand the question, not only the text but also the question. And then section C, they test your reading by giving you some French which you have to translate from French into English, and they're minimum of 35 words for foundation, minimum of 50 words for higher tier. So let's look at that in a bit more detail. So the texts then, they can be shorter and longer written texts. Sometimes the more complex language comes later on the test. So obviously you've got to be able to understand the overall message normally. It could be key points, could be details and opinions, and the sorts of things could be instructions like this, public notice. Pretty important to understand a notice like that, isn't it? And then it could be adverts. Also longer things like things out of brochures or or guides. It could be letters. But also they particularly say that they have to have some literary texts. And the first question that you're going to be doing in Module 4 is to do with a literary text, Le Petit Prince. For higher level, it'll be particularly past, present and future events, actually for the foundation as well. And the items, it says, will include authentic sources. So a lot of them will be authentic like that, but sometimes they will have to adapt them and abridge them to make sure that it's not too demanding. And then as far as the literary texts which are concerned, here's one here. It could include contemporary and historical sources. So that's what you're going to be reading. How do you respond? Well, as well as understanding what it means, it also has this word deduce. So they're not necessarily expecting you to understand every single word that's there, but they're hoping that from what you know already, you can deduce the meaning. So there will be some unfamiliar language, but normally the root of a particular word you'll have learnt in some other way. So you might have learnt the noun, but you don't know the verb that goes with it. So certainly the idea is, can you work out what things are? You'll get longer texts as well, and you might have to scan through for particular information. Again, you're not expected to understand everything. This is really important, but you're looking for relevant details. So again, this idea, not only are you deducing meaning from words you don't know, but but even if you understand it, sometimes it'll be at a higher level of inference, getting the inference and the implicit meaning. You'll have come across this with doing your GCSE English, that sometimes it's not just understanding the words, it's understanding what was in the author's mind, what impact did they want to have on the reader. So it's the same sort of thing that you might have to do, particularly at a higher level. What do they look like? Well, here's an example. This was given to us in 2016, ready for the first testing. So that's a specimen. That's just what it looks like there. So this is higher, looking at a higher level, 1 hour. So here we are. You know there are 3 sections. Here's the section A, where you'll have a text. So there's an example of something from a newspaper. By the way, this number 1 on the higher level is the overlap with the foundation level. So everybody would get something that looks like this. So it's a fairly long text there. But there, you look at it and all you've got to do is to write in a percentage. So you're working out what that means and working out what percentage goes there. So that's a multi-choice, but also there might be open-ended ones, which is the least popular reason, so you've got to write that in English. Section B, if you remember, that's where everything's in French. So it starts with lisez, so read the email, qui parle de ses projets scolaires, which is talking about the school projects. Not plans, sorry. It's not too difficult normally to understand that bit. But the questions themselves will be in French. So we've got to get you used to being able to read questions in French and answer them. This example here is an open-ended one, a question with you have got to produce the French. But there are also quite a few multi-choice ones, which could be either words or it could be symbols that you're ticking. And then for the section C, obviously you test your reading also as to, well, if you read something, could you put it into English? And all of the ones that we've had from the sample onwards have normally been marked out of 9, and there'll be 9 chunks there that you've got to be able to translate. So you're not getting a mark for every single word you do. You've got to be able to get the sense of each bit. And this is where it's quite demanding sometimes, because sometimes it could be just a little word in there. You might have understood the overall sense of it, but if you miss out a particular word like today or yesterday, you wouldn't get the mark. So it's ever so important to know as many words as you can for that. But it is just 9 marks out of a total of 60. Every year the exam board really helpfully puts out advice to teachers and to students about how to approach the exam, particularly based on their experience of marking from the previous year. So here's some advice which came out in January 2020. A lot of these things will seem very obvious. They're things which you do when you're doing English. I know when you're doing your English GCSE, you've got to be very clear about how to tackle a reading comprehension. One thing is make sure that you really read the introduction to the question. So in French, normally there is an introduction which says something like, the children are talking about their plans for after school, or the family's talking about what they did on their holiday. So that'll give you a context. That's important. Do answer every question, especially if it's a multi-choice where you've just got to write A, B, C or D. You can't lose out. They're not going to give you any negative marking. So if in doubt, have a guess. And also be aware that there are peaks and troughs. That means that sometimes, something will be very difficult, but the next one will be less difficult. And the next one will be a bit more difficult and then less difficult. So don't give up. Do read the whole of the sentence. Sometimes you think you've got the answer by just reading the beginning of it, but you've got to read to the end because there might be something which contradicts it or which adds to it. Typically, there's where people get caught out is sometimes where they'll say, is somebody expressing a positive or a negative or a positive and negative view about a particular subject? They may start by saying that they really like something and people might think, oh, that's positive, and go on to the next one. Do carry on, because you could carry on in the text and then find they say, but sometimes I'm not so happy with a particular aspect, in which case the answer is going to be P and N. So don't get caught out by seeing what's at the very start of it. Always read on. And in particular, every year they will say that it's negatives which catch people out. That they might see the verb and think, oh, they like it, and they just have missed out the ne pas, which means not. I don't like it. Another bit of advice is that if you've got a question, don't just copy out a whole chunk of the text thinking, oh, the answer might be in there. There might be a bit of it that's right, but there might be a bit of it which is wrong. And if there's anything which is wrong, obviously they're just not going to accept it. So be very careful about which bits very, very occasionally you can lift it from the text, but that's quite rare. Normally you've got to adapt it somehow. If you're told to give one reason or one detail about something, only give one. If you gave two and one of them is right and one of them is wrong, you're not going to get the answer, the mark. So that's really important. This is a paper which takes 60 marks. Remember that there were 9 for the translation. Do make sure you leave enough time for that. It's at the end of the exam, so there's a danger that people might rush that bit. I've even heard of some people who've decided that they'll just start with the translation and do that first of all, and then go back to the rest of it. So do manage your time across those sections. And be aware that as far as the translation goes, it isn't necessarily the hardest thing, because it covers, the parts of the translation are going to be actually easier than some of A and B. And the last bit of advice, or really instruction, is it tells you that you've got to answer in French, section B. Make sure that you do answer in French. It could even be that when you get the examination paper, you really highlight that bit, or you ring it round and you say, yes, I know that I've got to do that. When you're doing GCSE French, obviously quite a lot of our focus is on making sure that you'll be all right for the exam and teaching you various techniques. But it's nice to be able to look at authentic things from time to time. And I'm a great believer that when you look at real French and you read it for a purpose and you're interested, often that French sticks more than anything else that we do. So if you're the sort of person who actually likes reading books and you enjoy stories, I would really recommend that you find things, read them through, and when you look up a word and when you see it in context, I can guarantee you're going to remember that word much better than just seeing it as a formal exercise. So I'm just going to introduce to you now this book called Le Petit Prince. You may well have heard of it, because it's a very famous book, in fact. You can see The Little Prince. It's by somebody called Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. We'll find out about him over the next few minutes. And if you want to, if you just, there are obviously links that you can take. If you look into Wikipedia, the English one's a really long article, actually. It goes on and on and on, telling you about Le Petit Prince. So there's lots and lots and lots you can look at there. But also looking at the French. Not quite as long, the entry, but it's still very, very useful to look at it and find out about the background to Le Petit Prince. And what I've done is that I've just copied that and put that into the PowerPoint so that I can give you a little introduction now. Le Petit Prince est une œuvre de langue française la plus connue d'Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Publiée en 1943 à New York, simultanément à sa traduction anglaise, c'est une œuvre poétique et philosophique, sous l'apparence d'un conte pour enfants. So can you translate that? The Little Prince is une œuvre, is a work for the French language, and it's the most well-known of this author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Published in 1943 in New York, at the same time as its English translation. It's a poetic and philosophical work, sous l'apparence de, literally under the appearance of, being a conte pour enfants, a tale for children. Traduit en 361 langues, Le Petit Prince est le deuxième ouvrage le plus traduit au monde après la Bible. So translated into 361 languages. The Little Prince is the second most translated work in the world after the Bible. Wow. Le langage, simple et dépouillé, parce qu'il est destiné à être compris par des enfants, est en réalité, pour le narrateur, le véhicule privilégié d'une conception symbolique de la vie. Chaque chapitre relate une rencontre du Petit Prince qui laisse celui-ci perplexe par rapport au comportement absurde des grandes personnes. Ces différentes rencontres peuvent être lues comme une allégorie. So, the language, simple and dépouillé, I mean literally it's skinning something, making it bare, so probably uncluttered, so uncluttered. It's another, really another word for simple, really, simple and uncluttered, because it's literally destined to be understood by children, so it's aiming to be understood by children, is in reality, for the narrator, the preferred vehicle. It's his preferred vehicle of putting across a symbolic conception of life. Each chapter relates an encounter of the little prince, which leaves, and that means the latter, celui-ci, and that means the prince, which leaves the latter perplexed in relation to the absurd behaviours of grandes personnes, literally big people, in other words, adults. These different encounters can be read as an allegory. Les aquarelles font partie du texte et participent à cette pureté du langage. Dépouillement et profondeur sont les qualités maîtresses de l'œuvre. So he himself painted some lovely watercolours which go with it, which are very simple. So the watercolours are part of the text and participate literally, contribute to this purity of language. So being bare, uncluttered, and depth, so bareness and depth are the key qualities of the work. On peut y lire une invitation de l'auteur à retrouver l'enfant en soi, car toutes les grandes personnes ont d'abord été des enfants, mais peu d'entre elles s'en souviennent. L'ouvrage est dédié à Léon Werth, mais quand il était petit garçon. So you can read there an invitation from the author to find again the child in you, in oneself. For all, literally big people, all adults, at first were children. But few amongst them, elles are the personnes, they're feminine, plural, but few amongst them remember it. Se souvenir de is to remember something. The work is dedicated to Léon Werth, but when he was a little boy. So let's look at the detail that they give in, that was the introduction in the Wikipedia French version, and here's the detail which I've then put here so it might be a little bit easier to read. So you know these: naissance 29 juin 1900, Lyon, Rhône, France. So birth on the 29th of June 1900, Lyon, which is in that region in France. Décès, so that's when he died, the deceased, and you've got the time when he died, which you can see is 1944, when he was 44. And it was at the Large de Marseille. Now, Large, the chapter which I'm doing at the moment with Year 10, or we're about to do, is to do with going on holiday, and they actually have the word le grand large, so at sea in Marseille, because in fact he was in an aeroplane and he just got, they don't know what happened, and discovered the aeroplane much later on in the sea, in the Mediterranean by Marseille. That's where they found it. That's when his période d'activité, that's when he was active. À partir de, so from that age, so 1900, so from then on he was active. Nom de naissance, that's the name of his birth. Antoine Jean-Baptiste Marie Roger de Saint-Exupéry. He was actually from quite a noble family. You've got there what's called the nobiliary particle, anyone with a de. Nationalité, now there, it is the drapeau de la France, and he was French. Formation, that's his training. He was at Lycée Saint-Louis. And what about the activities? What did he do? All these things. Activité pilote, so he was a pilot, poète. Romancier, he wrote novels. Auteur de littérature d'enfance et de jeunesse, he wrote childhood literature and for young people. Essayiste, he wrote essays. That tends to be when you're writing an opinion about something. Écrivain is the general for a writer, and a journaliste is a writer for a newspaper, obviously a journalist. And here's what about his family. He's from this family de Saint-Exupéry, so that's your nobiliary particle. This is père, his father. Mère, his mother. She was also had a nobiliary particle. Marie de Fonscolome. And then this word for obviously brothers and sisters, fratrie. Now we've got Marie-Madeleine de Saint-Exupéry et Simone de Saint-Exupéry. And conjoint is another word for your husband or your wife. And so there's the name of his wife, Consuelo. You can go into a little bit more detail if you like here. On YouTube, there's a really good YouTuber who has done a little bit on him. So I'll give you the link so that you can look at that. You've got the picture there, and he talks about Le Petit Prince, and he also gives you the transcript to it. So I'll be able to give you a link so that you can get the transcript straight away for that as well. Okay. And this is great that now you can get the book itself. It's a ebook gratuit, free, so that you could click on there and then you'd be able to get the PDF of it. And not only is it the text, but as you go down, it's also got the lovely little pictures that he did as well, these aquarelles, these little watercolours. You can see there are 27 chapters, little short chapters, and there's the dedication. Okay. À Léon Wert, quand il était petit garçon, when he was a little boy. So just looking at it, there you are, first chapter. So I really recommend that would be a good one for you to look at. Page 88, exercise 1, reading. This is an exercise which looks quite similar to the sort of thing that you might get in the GCSE French. Be aware that the exam boards were told that they must, in their exams, include some passages which are genuinely taken from French literature. And as this warning says here, there will be some verb forms in this text that you won't recognise, because many French literary texts use a tense which is called the simple past, or le passé simple. Don't panic, you do not need to understand this tense in order to answer the questions. So, I feel a bit sorry for you, really, because you're having this forced on you. We've learnt le passé composé to express the perfect tense, but there is this thing which is literary. But do follow this advice of trying not to panic. You'll look at it, you'll think, I've not seen it like that. Don't worry. Just realise that if you don't really understand it particularly, you haven't recognised it as something you know, it'll be the past tense. Okay? This particular exercise is taken from Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and I've done another little video just introducing that. Here it is, that's what it looks like. So Le Petit Prince, written in 1943 by someone who was a pilot and a writer, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It's the second most translated work in the world after the Bible. So it's likely that you may well get something out of this in the exam. So I'll leave you now to do these. You've got to say which 4 statements are true, and you're only expected really to scan through this. Please do not worry if you don't understand everything, and then when you're ready, resume to see the answers. Answers coming up now. Voila. And of course the important thing is to know why those things were either right or wrong. So when you've marked them, then I'm going to give you a quick, rapid translation of the text. Translation coming up now. Here we go. The 6th planet was a planet 10 times bigger. So the answer here is it's definitely not going to be very small. It was inhabited by an old man who wrote enormous books. Hey, here's an explorer, he shouted out when he saw the little prince. The little prince sat at the table and breathed out a bit. So B, the old man thought that the little prince was an explorer, is correct. It is not that the prince thought that the old man was an explorer. So there it's understanding the word he, referring back to this old man. He cried when he saw the little prince. So he sat at the table and he breathed out a bit. Now here, this is this past historic tense, le passé simple, simple past. S'assit, souffla. You've not come across those before. In the passé composé, it's s'est assis, S''est, and then A-S-S-I-S. And this would be a soufflé, a, and then S-O-U-F-F-L-E with an accent. I won't go over all of them again, but just know that these are the things which are called le passé simple, or the simple past, or the past historic. So he sat at the table and breathed out a bit. Il avait déjà tant voyagé. He had already travelled so much. So there, D is correct because it's the prince who has travelled a lot. It's referring to the prince. D'où viens-tu? Lui dit le vieux monsieur, which means, where do you come from? Said to him the old man. So the fact that it's the old man who's saying, where do you come from, then he is incorrect. The old man recognised the little prince. No, he wouldn't have asked that question. So in a way, knowing that that is wrong means that you have inferred from that statement. And that's what the French GCSE reading is about. It's not just knowing what things mean, it's being able to have inference. Quel est ce gros livre? Dit le petit prince. Que faites-vous ici? What is this big book? Said the little prince. What are you doing here? Je suis géographe, dit le vieux monsieur. I'm a geographer, said the old man. So F is correct. The old man was a geographer. Qu'est-ce qu'un géographe? What is a geographer? C'est un savant qui connaît où se trouvent les mers, les fleuves, les villes, les montagnes et les déserts. It's a scholar. So savoir is to know something. So someone who knows something is a scholar. Qui connaît, who knows where, literally find themselves. Where are, it's another way of saying where are the seas, the rivers, the towns, the mountains and the deserts. Do you remember that the word rivière also means river, but a fleuve is a big river which goes into the ocean. Ça c'est bien intéressant, dit le petit prince. That's really interesting. Oh, sorry. And G, the old man mentioned villages. No, he mentioned ville, town. So they're trying to catch you out. That really was just to see, do you know what the word means? Ça c'est bien intéressant, dit le petit prince. That's really interesting, said the little prince. Ça c'est enfin un véritable métier. That at last is a real job. Et il jeta un coup d'œil autour de lui sur la planète du géographe. And he glanced around him on the planet of the geographer. Il n'avait jamais vu encore une planète aussi majestueuse. Now this is testing. Do you know your negatives? He had never yet seen a planet as majestic. So H is correct, that he wasn't familiar with the planet because it was using the negatives there. Page 86, exercise 2 reading. Again, this is similar to the sort of thing you might get in your GCSE reading. Read what two people say in a forum about climate change. Look at the questions on the next page, and you've got to write whether it's Coralie or Yanis or both of them who say something. And that's where the recommendation from the examiners was really make sure that you read on all of it before you start making a decision. Often they try to catch you out a little bit by making it seem as if somebody says something and actually they're not saying it. So do this, and here are the questions based on it. As it says here, with this type of task you need to read both passages with great care, as you must make sure that both people either do or do not mention the same topics. So you can't answer any question just by reading one passage alone. When you've done it, then resume for the answers. If it helps, there is a version here where you've got the questions at the same time as the text. Answers coming up now. So see how you did, and as usual, now we're going to go on and make sure that you understand what it means so you know why you were right or why you were wrong. Translation coming up now. Le changement climatique, climate change. Coralie says that because of the increase of greenhouse gas, serre, effet de serre, serre is a greenhouse, the average temperature on the Earth has gone up by almost, presque, 1 degree in 1 century. She explains that this change, this climate change, impacts nature, animals and people. There are more and more vagues de chaleur, is a heat wave. So even if you hadn't come across the word chaleur, you might have got it from chaud, you'd feel chaud, it's hot, heat wave and storms. All that can spoil or destroy houses, fields or roads. Moreover, another thing, she explains that since it is warmer, the glaciers melt more quickly. Now, when ice melts, elle refers to la glace, it transforms, it turns into eau, water, which flows to the sea. Result, the level of the sea rises. Yanis thinks that climate change perturbs nature and animals. Those who like heat travel towards new places because it's warmer there. And those who like the cold are forced to, or obliged to, leave their habitat. He adds that because of, you might not know la sécheresse, but you could have got it from this, manque de pluie, lack of rain, because of the drought, or inondation, floods, which is too much water. By the way, this comes up in a later chapter. Certain people don't have enough to eat. In France, when the summer is too dry, you have less corn, for example, or then the clementines lose their flavour and are less coloured. Elsewhere, there will be more floods caused by the ice which will melt. So now you can see why these are the correct answers. Worried about climate change can affect nature and animals. Both of them mention that. And I think that's quite straightforward, because Coralie has got the word about it impacting nature and animals, and Yanis saying it perturbs nature and animals. Number 2, it's only Coralie who mentions destroying fields and roads. So for that you just had to know that the word les champs was fields and les routes are the roads. The number 3, who's concerned they might not have enough to eat, that's definitely Yanis, who's got their n'ont pas assez à manger, do not have enough to eat. So you had to know that that was the negative. There's no mention of food here at all. They both mention the weather, don't they? But the only one who actually uses the word storms and talks about that is Coralie down here, where she talks about that there'll be more tempêtes. So that was testing that one. This one about the effects of glaciers melting, it was expressed in a different way, but actually both of them did say it. So les glaciers fondent plus vite, glaciers melt more quickly, and here la glace qui fondra, the ice which will melt. So both of them mentioned that. And the only one talking about the animals needing to migrate are Yanis over here, who's got about those who like cold have to leave their habitat.